Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. It's an honor to be here. Why? Because I consider each one of you as a very important person. Back in your state legislatures, in your various states, you make decisions that affect me and doctors like me in our offices across the United States. So I'm happy to come here and share with you my thoughts. Over the years, I've learned and truly have begun to appreciate what you're trying to do and how truly difficult your job is. Today, what I will be doing in the few minutes that I have is focus on evidence-based medicine and its application to prescription drugs. I only have a few minutes, so I will focus on the power of the study, and we'll get into that. But if you're interested in getting into greater detail, I highly recommend this article by Twyla Brace, Evidence-Based Medicine, Rationing Care, Hurting Patients. She does a terrific job of going into detail regarding the problems that we face out practicing medicine, problems related directly and indirectly to evidence-based medicine. I also recommend the Healthcare News, which is out at the registration desk. That comes out each month. It's from the Heartland Institute, so I'll put in a plug for them. In general, regarding healthcare issues, I think you'll find this to be very helpful. So let's get started. Evidence-based medicine, it's the new kid on the block. It's only really been around since the 90s. And in fact, it was in 1991 that it was first mentioned in a medical journal. It's only been around for a few years, and it sounds like such a great idea. And it is. It is a great idea. But we're running into problems with it where I practice, where the rubber meets the road. And that's what I want to share with you today. We talk about evidence-based medicine, and we hear that doctors don't use evidence-based medicine when they're treating their patients. And that's true, they don't. And they shouldn't. Why do I say that? Think about evidence. Evidence is really a legal term. It's in a trial that evidence is brought forth and decisions are made. Data, on the other hand, is what doctors use. Lawyers use evidence, doctors use data. What's the difference? Evidence doesn't change. We have a picture of an intersection. We see a car drive through the intersection, crash into another car. We see that it ran a red light. That's evidence. It's solid. It's fact. It's not going to change. We use that in a court of law. Doctors, on the other hand, use data. And data can vary. And data, over time, our impressions regarding it can conflict. As we learn more and more about the human body, we're able to interpret the data better, and sometimes our interpretations change. Evidence, data. My concern is many things that are brought to you as evidence are really data. And by calling them evidence, they're given a level of credibility that they don't really carry, they don't deserve. Sort of like those subprime mortgages that were mixed in with the good mortgages, and we call this a AAA rating, when it shouldn't have been AAA. We've got some problem mortgages here. Likewise with evidence-based medicine. Everything brought to you as evidence may not be evidence. So I want to alert you to that. And remember, statistical analysis never proves. It merely lets you speak in terms of probabilities. And that's what we do in medicine. The evidence-based movement has become very strong. Unfortunately, it's exclusionary at times, it's normative, it's polarizing. It extinguishes free speech, creativity. I have been on rounds with young doctors, interns, and residents. And instead of thinking their way through a problem, they tend to memorize algorithms now. When I and Congressman Price were going to medical school, we didn't talk about evidence, did we, Congressman? We talked about, what did the literature show? What's the data? What did the lab show? What does Dr. Miller think? What have we done in the past? We didn't stand there and say, what's the evidence? So I'm concerned about the crushing of innovation. That medical student standing there coming up with an idea, but then crushing it because, well, this is the algorithm, and this is outside of that algorithm. For example, when Congressman Price and I were in medical school, they did surgeries when you had a stomach ulcer. Now we can treat it with a medication. What a terrific breakthrough. You've got to be able to think. You've got to think. Yet our medical students were having them memorize algorithms. Now, let's go on. I want to bring home the point, the power of the study. This applies not only in medicine, this will apply to other areas that you are in. When people come to you with studies and say, here's the study, this is the evidence, this is what we found, I want you to step back and think about the power of the study. When I have an extended period of time to drive home this point, what I do, I'll bring up a male and a female who do not know each other, and I'll tell them, I'm going to prove that you're related. I'm going to use evidence-based medicine and prove you're related. Not only related, I'm going to prove you two are twins. Not only twins, identical twins. What do? I bring them up and I say, let's measure these people. Let's study them. Let's see where the differences are. So I go through the usual. How tall are you? How much do you weigh? Et cetera, et cetera. I start with weight, and we have ladies first. So I ask, Miss, how much do you weigh? Do you weigh more than a ton or less than a ton? Well, less than a ton. But when I say, what do you weigh, you can see everybody in the audience go, thank God he didn't call on me. And then I ask them, how tall are you? Are you taller than 10 feet or less than 10 feet? They're both less than 10 feet. How many hands do you have? 2 hands. Eyes, 2 eyes. Toes, 10. And you go on and on and on, and you develop all this evidence. And you could fill books with it, proving they're the same, they're identical. What we see happening today in studies that are underpowered, we have people saying, we found no difference. Then they make the bold step. They take the bold step. Therefore, there is no difference. You know, that's like looking at Saturn with a telescope, not seeing the rings and saying, we found no rings. Therefore, there are no rings. That's like looking at a drop of pond water with a microscope and saying, we found no bacteria. Therefore, there are no bacteria. Well, obviously, that's wrong. That telescope was not powered strong enough to see those rings. That microscope did not have enough power to see that bacteria. But for you then to take the next step and say, therefore, these rings don't exist, therefore, this bacteria doesn't exist, that's wrong. Yet that's what we see happening today. Here's the example. This is the example in medicine. This comes out of Oregon, the DERP, D-E-R-P. This is where they study the various classes of drugs, and they attempt to determine what are the differences between them. Now look what they've done. We've got these various classes of drugs. Each class has many drugs in it. And yet, look at the conclusions they've come to. They found no differences. In each of these are major classes of drugs. They didn't find any differences. Therefore, they conclude there are no differences. Except for price. There we go. We don't find any difference other than price. But I can assure you there are differences there. And if your study is underpowered, if your evaluation does not have enough power, you are not going to pick up those differences. Let me give you an example. Congressman Price would recognize these. These are hormones. Look how similar they are. You would think they did the same thing. They're in the same class. Now look at them. One's testosterone, makes boys. The other one, progesterone, estradiol, makes girls. Look at the major difference. And these are molecules that are very similar.